Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. So, today we are going to be talking about mom guilt, and I was having some technical difficulties trying to get in here, but we're here now, and yay! Um, so, hello, welcome. I'm going to make sure that this is going. But today we're talking about mom guilt, and I do have some notes. So, I will be occasionally looking over there to my notes. But hello. We're going to talk about a guilt-free mom life or a guilt-free life in general and a path to confidence by letting guilt go, letting go of unnecessary and I just lost the word. Unnecessary and inappropriate guilt. So let me make sure that we are live. Okay, we're live. Great, and I can hear. Okay, fantastic. So let's talk guilt-free life. What is unnecessary and inappropriate guilt, and how do we let it go? Why do we carry it around? All of that. So let's chat about it. So I know that it's so easy to carry the guilt. And like as moms, as neurodivergent moms, millennial moms in business, like we carry so much guilt. There's a lot of mixed messages around us being like, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way. It's all around, right? So let's dive into what is unnecessary and inappropriate guilt. Where does it come from? Why do we feel like carrying it around? Why do we accept responsibility for it? How do we let it go? Like, how do we just like let it go? And I want to empower you guys to thrive as moms, as entrepreneurs, as anybody seeing this video. I want you to thrive in that. So, first off, listen. There's going to be a workbook. I'm going to have it linked. I will put it in. I know I don't have it right now, but I'm going to make a workbook for this. It's going to be in the description when this like continues on in perpetuity. And so there will be a workbook that you can kind of work through some of this, that you can kind of journal it out, that you can process it for yourself. But let's first talk about what is unnecessary or inappropriate guilt. So it's guilt that we're carrying that isn't ours to carry, is essentially what it is. Now, it is an internal feeling of discomfort for something we did or didn't do. That's what guilt is just in general. It's this feeling of discomfort for something we did or we did not do that we either feel like we should have done or should not have done. We should have done it this way or we should not have done it this way. So that is what guilt is. When it's unnecessary or inappropriate is when we're doing that for something that we don't have to take, like we don't have to be feeling bad about. We did something and we're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But like, it's totally okay that you did. Or we didn't do something and we're like, oh, I should have done that. But it's okay that you didn't. And we're going to focus on two biggest kinds, in my opinion, what I've seen of unnecessary guilt that we carry around. It stems from us feeling like we did something wrong or bad. And when it gets twisted in our minds, that's when we carry the inappropriate kind. For those of us who are neurodivergent, we carry a lot of this kind of guilt because we're also just trying to navigate what is required of us by society. We're trying to figure out, like, we feel like our executive dysfunctioning sets us at a disadvantage, or like people are judging it, or we beat up on ourselves for like losing our keys, misplacing things, forgetting things, leaving things strewn about, whatever it is. And for moms, it also comes into play where we get mixed messages a lot, how you should do certain things, etc. And so this culminates in this deep feeling of guilt. For moms especially, we walk around just carrying this bag of mom guilt as if it's like a badge of honor, but it's weighing us down. It is causing us grief. And in my opinion, about 95% of mom guilt is kind of a liar. So we have to address it. We have to figure out how we're managing it. So what is this guilt and where does it come from? Most typically, this kind of guilt comes from two places. These are the two that we're going to focus on today. One is taking on someone else's discomfort, and two is a values crisis, which we're going to talk about those. So let's look at the first one, which is taking on someone else's discomfort. And that is where we do something or we don't do something, and we're talking about it, and we hear a message from the outside of like, you shouldn't have done it that way. You should have done it this way. You shouldn't have done it that way. You should have done it this way. This is how it's supposed to be done. Why did you do it this way? And so what happens is we get so many messages about what it means to be a good human, what it means to run a business, what it means to be a mom, etc. And that comes with disappointing or going against someone. Every time. Someone is always on the opposite side. Someone is over here or over there going. And the second one kind of has a similar play. So the second one is a values crisis. So in the first one, we take on someone else's discomfort for ourselves. Like, we're like, okay, I see you, and I'm going to take that discomfort and it's going to be internalized as guilt. I'm going to internalize it as feeling bad for doing the thing. But really it was a them thing. Like, they were discomfort. They were in discomfort and you took that on. The second thing is a values crisis. So real guilt comes from something we did against our values. Real guilt is something against our morals. We will feel guilty if it's something we do outside of what we consider good or moral. Okay. So it gets twisted sometimes. We either don't fully know our values, and so we do something in line with our values, but we're like stuck with someone else's values or not knowing what our values are, and so we don't see where it lines up, or we're kind of taking on the point of view of someone else around us and it's not lining up with their values, and we're not thinking about the fact that my values don't match their values, and so we get into this value crisis. So let's take an example of each of these. So let's say I, as a mom, this is actually an example from yesterday. I do breakfast. I get my kids ready in the morning. We get out the door. My husband has already been gone at work. It's just me getting the kids up, getting everything ready, getting stuff together, and then getting out the door. And when I left the water pitcher out. I put most of the fridge stuff away, so that's good. But I left the water pitcher out. I left, I didn't put the dishes in the sink yet. I hadn't refilled the ice water chamber. There was stuff left over from the morning strewn about. And I came back home and saw it all. And I was like, oh, look, there's evidence of my ADHD brain just strewn about. So I could have let that make me feel guilty for people like, oh, you should have picked up before you left the house. Because that does happen. Like we've heard messages like that. You should have picked up before you left the house. You can't leave it like this. You can't like leave things strewn about. They have to be picked up. That's someone else's discomfort. If I need to leave it to go to take my kids to school and I'm coming home to work, like I'll just take care of it later. So that's taking on someone else's discomfort. A values crisis is, let's say, for example, that I value this one's a little harder. Let's say I've already worked out, like my kids go to school, because my kids do currently go to school. And I hear a mom talking about homeschooling, and there's a little bit of a negative message of like against parents who send their kids to school. And then I'm like, oh, I feel guilty. Oh, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I am spending not enough time with them, whatever. For some people, they would look at that and be like, well, maybe that's your message that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. No, that's a message that maybe I need to sit down and look at. What are my actual values? Where do I place them? Do I value education, or do I value education outside of the home? Do I value education in the home? Do I value both, but one works better for my family, etc. So it's not about, oh, this means you should do this. It's about, no, that means you might want to look at whose discomfort are you taking on, and what values are they really in crisis with. So why do we carry this unnecessary guilt around? For moms especially, and especially neurodivergent moms, we receive a lot of mixed messages. This is also true of entrepreneurs. This is true of basically any group of people. There's a lot of mixed messages about there. But if you think about how society talks about feeding kids, educating kids, how much time we spend with our kids, should we work? Should we work from home or not? Is it okay that we're running a business that takes up a lot of our time? Is the work we do at home even considered work, or is it not? Etc. Things like that. And so the answers to all of this is just more mixed messaging. When we pull the answers out, we put them all together, it's just, we're going to end up letting someone down. Then we add in the neurodivergent mixed messages, or the veiled messages of like, this is how society runs. This is how our brain should work. We're at a disadvantage of knowing how to move and connect with the world, because the world wasn't necessarily built for us. And so we're like trying to navigate that. And then we take on that guilt because it's someone else's discomfort. We do this a lot in the chronically ill community too. We feel guilty about being ill in the first place, being a burden. We feel guilty about like having to rest, having to utilize resources that are there for us, because the system at large is telling us we are a burden, we are a drain, but that's not the truth. So what happens is we take on their discomfort, and that makes us feel guilty for just existing. So when we want to appease others' discomforts, we pick up the guilt. We're just like, oh, yep, I'll take that. Oh, yep, I'll take that. Okay, I'll take that too. This is now my guilt, even though it's your discomfort. And so we also do this in order to ease the crisis of values. We take on the guilt, right? If we don't know what our values are, that's a crisis of values, and we carry the guilt for something that we probably just don't need to feel guilty for. So now that we know what it is and why we carry it, let's talk about how are we going to let it go? Because we've already talked about how we pick it up from other places. So how do we let it go? How do we put it down and walk away? Well, one of the first things we're going to do is get really crystal clear on our values. Really crystal clear. What is important to me? What are my priorities? What matters to me and my family in this season of life? We're going to get really crystal clear on that. And so I want you to think about right now. What is one recurring situation or thought that makes you feel guilty? One recurring thing that when that thing happens, it's always followed by a pang of guilt or a long drawn out thought of guilt. What is that thing? And then I want you to look at it and ask yourself, am I picking this discomfort up from someone else? Or is there a potential crisis of value here that is actually going against what I value, or is it going against what I see someone else value? And in order to do that, we have to know our values. So in the workbook, I'm going to include a worksheet focused specifically on identifying your values. But a few of them now, just because I do this work a lot with kids, with teens, or I did when I was working mostly with kids and teens, now with women in my coaching, but also in my day job. I have a private practice as a therapist. We do a lot of values clarification work. So you could value things such as time freedom, money, power, independence, location freedom. You could value family. You could value friends, but also the expressions of those values might look different. So in this worksheet, it's going to go a little bit deeper. We're not just going to look at the above level values of like, yeah, I value family, because my expression of valuing family and your expression of valuing family could look very different. So for you, it might look like I am homeschooling my children because that is a value that I have. And for someone else, it might be, I don't believe that I don't feel, and I don't know how to say this because I don't necessarily love the wording, but I don't feel like I can educate my children. So I believe their best place is in a different educational environment. And that is a perfectly adequate thing to think and believe. But I also want to discourage self-disparagement. So we do want to know our limits. We want to know, but we also want to know what is important to us. And maybe for some, they're like, well, I value the work that I do. Like for me, I stayed at home for 5 years, almost 6 years, and I worked from home. But I also missed being a therapist. I missed being in that one-to-one contact. And I loved being a coach, but I was doing more of like psychoeducational stuff, and that wasn't quite for me. And so because I do value that, I am looking for ways to like work with my family so that we all get our needs met. And honestly, watching my kids in school, it has been such a blessing for them. They have loved it. And when I talk to my daughter about the potential of pulling her out to homeschool or doing a hybrid program in the future where we homeschool and they also get services, it's a program that we have around here. It's a hybrid program. She's not really into it. She doesn't really like that. My son, however, all over it. Sure, more time at home, great. But my daughter, not so much. So we're going to get really clear on our values and our values expression. We're going to get really clear on our values and what that means on a deeper level for us. Because once we can do that, we can start really recognizing, like I said a minute ago, think of that situation and then determine, is this a values crisis or am I picking up someone else's discomfort? So that's the first step. That's the first way we're going to start letting some of this go. We're going to start like putting it out there. The second thing is we're going to identify our needs in this season of life. So what do I mean by that? One thing I hated when we had our daughter was that I was an underproducer. Like quite literally, medically speaking, I was underproducing. And I know there's moms out there that's going to be like, that's not a real thing. It is. There are 3% of us or more who actually are. And it was not serving my child. Formula saved her life because it fed her. It kept her fed in a way that my body just couldn't. And the amount of guilt that came with that at the time felt suffocating. But once I really sat down with it, I was like, wait a minute. Whose guilt am I taking on here? Along with the grief of recognizing my body couldn't do what I expected it to, what I hoped it would do, what I thought it should do. And yes, there was grief there. But beyond the grief, there was guilt. And whose was it? It wasn't mine. I didn't do anything wrong. There was no moral failing. And it was something I couldn't control. I was taking on, there was a values crisis, first of all, because I valued being able to have my body do what it's supposed to do as a woman. And I valued that connection between me and my child. At no point was I against formula. I just really wanted to be able to breastfeed. I appreciated formula. I have always been a fed is best person. And in that moment, I realized there was a values crisis because I wanted it to be for me. Then I realized I was also taking on the discomfort of other people. Other people were telling me, you have to do this. This is the way it goes. Other people were telling me, this is the best way to do it. But the reality is, whatever is going to keep my daughter from becoming a failure to thrive, whatever is going to keep my daughter alive. And she started actually making her markers, growing. Like, we were in so many doctor's appointments, so many weigh-ins in her first 2 weeks of life that, like, sometimes I feel guilty that it took me so long to get there, but we're not picking that up. We're letting that go because, we're not taking that on. But she was eating better, much, much better once we started. But that is where knowing this stuff helps us, like, really sit down and be like, what does my family need in this season? So you've already figured out your values. You've already figured out, like, you already can recognize the messages and whose discomfort you're picking up. But then you're also like, what does my family need in this season? Maybe you're like, we absolutely cannot afford for either parent to stay home. And as much as, like, my values would say, I want that, that's not the need for our family right now. The need for our family is this. So we both go to work and my kids go to school. Great. Totally fine. So then when we realize that there is a need here that goes against my values, so the guilt comes because there's a value crisis because I'm doing something against my values or against what I would like my values expression to be. So you might value both. You might value everybody. Like, I value stay-at-home parents, working from home parents, working parents, like all of it. But I also know that I have a recognized valued expression that I want for my family and for me. That is family flexibility, my ability to be able to pick them up and drop them off. That is my ability to make choices like today. When I get done with this, I'm picking them up early and I'm taking them to the beach because they had a hard morning and it's one of our last sunny days for a long time here in Washington. But that is what I would like my values expression to be in this season. Or just in general. I want to be home as much as possible, available for my children, while also making an income. So you recognize what your family's needed in this time. And if you recognize it is against our need, kind of conflicts with my values or what I want my values expression to be, then you honor the need. This is what my family needs. And that's great. And so once you've realized what your family needs, you can be like, okay, I'm doing what's best for my family because this is what my family needs. And once you start to recognize that, again, much like with our previous scenario of knowing our values and recognizing, oh, I'm taking on someone else's discomfort, we let that go, right? We let that go. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's not a values crisis that causes the inappropriate guilt. It is typically a values expression crisis. And so the next thing that we want to do, so we have identified our values and our values expressions. We have identified our current need in this season of life, like how we need to live right now, what is best for us and our family right now in this moment. And the next thing is, I want you to think about your friend. I want you to think about another mom. I want you to think about another neurodivergent person. If you have, I want you to think about another person in a similar situation. Would you apply the same guilt to them that you do to yourself, or would you offer grace? I want you to think about that. Would you apply the same guilt to them that you apply to yourself, or would you offer them grace? If you would look at someone like you and see all the choices they're making and be like, rock on, you are doing a great job. You're trying your hardest. You are rocking in these areas. You are doing great. Would you look at them and do that? Or would you look at them and be like, oh my gosh, let me tell you all the things you're doing wrong. Let me tell you all the things that you need to do better. You're not doing this way. You're not doing this way. And if the answer is no, I would not. I would show up. I would encourage them. I would point out their strengths. I would maybe ask them if they need help in other areas. I would give them so much grace. I would do this. Okay, then we're doing that for ourselves now. Because you are that person. And you can get it from within, just like you can give it to someone else. You can give it to yourself. So we're going to take that and we're going to put the guilt down. So now I want you to think about for yourself, if you could physically let go of this guilt, what would it look like? To me, my image, and what I work with my clients a lot on, I do want to encourage them to find their own images. But for me, the image of my mind is I'm carrying a backpack because it's like, it's heavy on my back. It's heavy on my shoulders. This is what guilt feels like to me. And it's piled high with stuff. It's piled high. When I have to take a rest day, you're a bad mom. When I'm having a flare up and everything's in pain and I can't make dinner, you're a bad wife. Whatever that guilty message is, it just piles on. But here's what I think of. Then I get to do my process and I get to I'm not a bad wife. Everyone's still getting fed. I'm still connecting with my husband, putting that down. I'm not a bad mom. I just have chronic illnesses that affect my body and I'm taking a rest. My kids are in and out of my bedroom whenever that happens. We still talk. We still connect. I still lay on the couch sometimes with my heating pad. I'm still a good mom. Things are still getting done. Whatever it is. Oh, I left stuff all over the kitchen when I took my kids to school and now I'm cleaning it up later. Not a bad mom, not a bad wife. Don't need to feel guilty. Don't need to take that on. We're putting it away. And so we can accept real guilt, take responsibility, fix the situation, and move forward. But even the other day, I had a miscommunication with someone and I was like feeling guilty for the briefest of seconds for not explaining it well or not, like the words that were in my head didn't match like what they were wanting to know. And I was like profusely apologizing. And then I was like, no, we're done with that. Like it was a miscommunication and it's okay. It's not a moral failing. And so I was like, oh, I'm realizing now where this disconnect is. I apologize for my part in that disconnect. Here is what I actually meant. And then guess what? The problem got solved. No harm, no foul. It's done. It's taken care of. Great. So that is how we're letting it go. And I want you to think about you. What is it physically like to let it go? Is it unpacking a bag? Is it taking off bags? Is it maybe for you, guilt just like sits in your head. So maybe for you, it's like taking off hats. Whatever it is, I want you to think about that. And that's how we're going to start doing that. And then whenever things come up that threaten to like make you feel guilty, I'm not spending enough time on my business. I'm not spending enough time with my kids. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm too focused. I'm too aggressive. I'm to this, to that. That makes us feel those guilty feelings. I want you to go through this process. What are my values? By then, you'll already know your values. So like you can check it with that. What are my values? Okay, well, what I'm doing aligns with my values or my chosen values expression. So there's no need to keep it. There it goes. And we let it go. If you're like, okay, something here doesn't align with my value expression, what is my need at this time? Oh, this is my need. Oh, this is why this is happening. Okay, got it. Okay, letting it go because I'm meeting my needs. And then we are like, okay, this is someone else's discomfort. This is, it aligns with my values. It is not against what I need right now. It aligns with my values expression. But I'm hearing these messages of these people saying, you have to spend this amount of time with your kids. You have to spend this amount of time on your business. You have to put in this many hours a week or you're going to fail. So what I'm doing is I'm taking on that person's discomfort. I'm taking on that person's, like, if I don't do it their way, there's like, that's on them. But I'm taking that and turning it into guilt because it's really about them and their perception. Okay, so I let that go. And then I want you to really think about physically letting it go. And I want you to think about that other person in your shoes and how you would treat them, what you would say to them, what you would ask of them. Please don't step on me. No, thank you. No, thank you. Okay. Yes. So I want you to think about that. What would I say to them? What would I want them to know? And how can I tell that to myself? Right? And then we physically let it go. So now, how do we turn all of this into empowering us to thrive as moms and entrepreneurs, especially as neurodivergents? How do we do that? Well, it starts by not picking up the guilt in the first place. So from now going forward, I want you to envision this each time you want to pick up something that makes you feel guilty. Analyze it. And then, I mean, if you really have done something like yelling at your kids, or if you've really done something that you know doesn't align with your values or your values expression, and it's not meeting your need right now, and you're like, wait, I really don't agree with this thing, we're still going to let that guilt go. But how we're going to do that is very different. In that case, we're going to accept responsibility. We're going to process that responsibility. We're going to apologize where we need to. We're going to own up to it. We're going to fix it as best we can. And then we're going to move on. And we're not carrying the guilt with us. We're letting it go once we've processed it. But if it's unnecessary and inappropriate, we are not even taking it on for ourselves. So that's the first step. Real guilt, we're actually processing out, and we are managing by actually handling the situation that we have caused. We're taking responsibility, and then we're letting it go. Inappropriate and unnecessary guilt, which is usually the type that most of us carry around most of the time, we're just not even going to pick it up anymore. We're going to process what we have and let it go, and then we're not picking any of it back up again. So that's the first step to us being thriving moms, entrepreneurs, neurodivergents, people in general, okay? The next thing is, I want you to think about things that you've done in your life that maybe other people were down on, that made you really proud. Something you did for yourself that someone else didn't understand, but you were like, that was awesome. I'm really proud of myself. Something in your life that you achieved that other people were like, you're never going to get there, where you're like, I'm so proud of this. This is awesome. I'm so proud of myself. Okay. I want you to think about that. And then I want you to hold on to that, because what that does, and I'm sorry, the sun probably moved behind clouds. It's Washington, and this is how it happens. I want you to think about that, and I want you to hold on to that and be like, this is awesome, okay? Because as we go forward, I want you to see that you have the power to make those things happen despite negative feelings, or despite someone else's negative feelings, despite someone else feeling like you are too much or not enough, or whatever it is that they thought that they tried to put on you to try to make you feel guilty for doing the thing. I want you to hold on to that, because as we get used to that, as we get used to hearing people's discomfort with what our choices are, hearing people's opinions and that they think you should do it a different way, and how could you bottle feed? It's a baby, or you should be breastfeeding, or vice versa, or how could you send your kids to school? You should be homeschooling, or how could you homeschool? You should be sending them to school. Your kid's never going to be well educated, which goes both, people on both sides say that. So I want you to think about the choices you've made along the way, that you've heard other people's things and been like, no, I'm going to do it anyway. Because that's going to help us thrive too, because we're going to be confident in our choices. We are building confidence in the choices we make without the guilt, because we're not picking the guilt back up. So that is true of like so many achievements that we achieve, right? Like, in my day job field, being a therapist, there's a lot of chatter around where you have to start. You have to start in community mental health. You have to start, with low prices. You have to do XYZ. Private practice is hard. You should be in a group practice. You shouldn't start whatever. There's all these messages, right? But the reality is we have to do what's right for our careers, for our families. What it looks like for me to be in private practice is very different than what it looks like for a man with fully grown children or no children, or whose wife takes care of all the children. So we have to think about that, and that way we can start to filter out these other voices. I'm going to take a drink, excuse me. So that way we get really used to filtering out the other voices, and we are confident in the choices that we're making. Another thing I want you to think about is think about areas that you can reframe current challenges that you're experiencing. Is guilt what's actually stopping you from moving forward? Is it doubts about yourself? Is it insecurities? And how are those intertwined together? And how can you use what we just talked about something that you did that makes you proud, to be the catalyst for like, hey, if I could do that, I could do this. And what areas of growth do you have an opportunity for here so that you can move forward? And then another thing is experiencing gratitude. Gratitude for what we have, choices we've made, how choices we've made have led to what we have now. Gratitude for the good things in front of us and not the negative things. Because it's really easy to look around at stuff like, and wish we had something different, wishing we had whatever this person has, wishing we had whatever this person has, wishing we had what was on the other side. But when we can get thankful, and then we can feel guilt, because before that, when we look at all those things we don't have, or we wish we had, or we want to have, then we feel guilty about not having those things, or not getting them, or not doing the things that it would have taken to get them. But when gratitude comes in, we see what we've really achieved. We see what we've really accomplished. And we're better able to show up in our lives. So, all of that to say, this is how we build a path to confidence, by letting go of guilt. This is how we build a guilt-free mom life. And again, this doesn't mean we'll never feel guilty. It doesn't mean that we will never experience appropriate guilt, because appropriate guilt is, again, appropriate. It's there to help us make corrective action. So, and this doesn't mean that we will never be encountering or threatened by inappropriate or unnecessary guilt. What this means is when we encounter appropriate guilt, we can take responsibility, process it, and let it go. And when we encounter unnecessary and inappropriate guilt, we just are not going to pick it up anymore. We're going to use these tools that we've talked about today to leave it there. Leave it where it is. If it is because of someone else's discomfort, you can even like visualize yourself putting it back at their feet, handing it back to them. This is your discomfort. This is your thing. This is the thing that you think I should do, but that's not me. This is me. That's you. This is me. So you can visualize yourself when the guilt starts to feel like it's coming, being like, nope, I'm leaving it here. Nope. Once you've analyzed this is appropriate or inappropriate guilt. Nope, I'm leaving it here. Nope, I'm giving this back to you. And it's pretty easy to tell. Like if I'm really short with my kids, or if I have a moment where I do something, good example, this morning, we were kind of in a little bit of a rush dropping kids to the different places. And my daughter didn't get to say goodbye to my son, and she was very upset about it. And I was like, my goal as a mom, what aligns with my values, expression, is to give my kids the opportunities to do things that keep them connected, to not make them feel, I can't protect them from all negative feelings. But in that moment, I was like, okay, I didn't really feel guilty because we had to rush, but I felt a little tinge of like, oh, I'm kind of sad. Maybe like processing what that was. But what I did do was be like, baby, I'm sorry that I rushed you and that you didn't get to say goodbye. Tomorrow, I will do better to make sure that you get a chance to say goodbye to brother before we go to school, because I always take him to school first. So once you kind of realize like, oh, I did something that's not quite in line with this. Oh, I did mess up a little bit here. Oh, I did kind of take this on. That's what guilt is for. That's what real guilt is for. But we are going to get better at parsing that out. Parsing out what is real guilt and what is not real guilt. Parsing out what is our responsibility and what is not. And when it is our responsibility, we own up to it like I did. We make amends if need be, if it was something we did against someone else. If it's something we did against ourselves or whatever, we fix it however we can. But if it's inappropriate and unnecessary, we're not picking it up anymore. We're going to like recognize what it is and leave it there. And that's how we live without a lot of guilt. It's not that we're not taking responsibility. It's not that we're not ever listening to those cues. It's that we are listening to them appropriately, necessarily. This is why I call it appropriate and inappropriate guilt. We are going to process it appropriately, and we're not taking on what is unnecessary, what is not ours to take on. And so if you are like, I love this and I want to know more, the workbook will be in the description. But if you're like, I feel this, but I'm also dealing with like the burnout, and I want to be able to really work on this a little more deeply. The longer version of the workbook, there's going to be a deeper version of the workbook, along with some tools to help you prevent or overcome burnout, to help you really find yourself and your confidence in motherhood. I have a motherhood toolkit that is currently on sale until the 15th of March. So that's another about 11 days. That will be linked below. And you can order that toolkit. It's an all digital toolkit. You'll have instant access to what's in there right now. More stuff is being added between now and the 15th. And that's why it's on sale right now. But you will get access to all of this. This video will end up being a part of that, along with the longer workbook. So you'll have a direct link to it in your portal, but you'll also have the burnout reset workshop and workbook. You will have the freedom in motherhood workbook, which really focuses on confidence and identity and getting your life aligned so that you're living in freedom. It will have motherhood and neurodivergent affirmations, as well as realistic tips for what you can do today for living life. And so it's also going to have a few other little things like an actual workbook about building confidence in motherhood and walking confidently in your choices so that you're not as tempted to pick up this kind of guilt in the first place, like because you're just like walking authentically, empowered, and intuitively in your motherhood, in your neurodivergence, in your womanhood, and so you're not even tempted to pick up those things. That will be in there, and a few other small guides will also be in there. It is $47, but right now this whole toolkit is on sale for $27.99. again until the 15th of this month. And by then it will be complete. Right now it has a few things already in it and things that are dripping in until the 15th. And so once it's complete, it goes up to its full price of $47. But that is linked below. The abridged workbook for this is linked below with all the main details and points. That is linked below. That is free. You don't have to pay for that. But that's linked below. And then the other thing that is linked below is my program. If you're like, that toolkit sounds great, I love that, but I would like more in-depth work. I need someone to work this through with me. I get it. I understand it, but I really need to process it with someone. I really need to talk to someone. I really need to like work this through with someone. My program is also linked below. It is also at a discount right now for the next 5 people to sign up. It is at a discount. And in that this is part of what we do. We talk about how we let go of this. We talk about building confidence as a mom. We really work on getting through the mom burnout, because imagine a life where you're just not burned out all the time. You're not feeling the mom guilt all the time. You wake up loving life. You get to live life your way with your kids on your terms. You get to build a business on your terms. And it feels authentic. It feels light. It feels natural. And it's not full of hustle, burnout, and questions and guilt, because that's what I help moms do in my program. I mostly work with moms, but if you're a woman and you're like, well, I need this, but I'm not a mom, you're still welcome. And it is also, I've got a lot in there geared towards moms with autism and ADHD, try to navigate this whole motherhood thing, because we're also have an extra level of mixed messages, misinformation, and people who just don't want to see us succeed. And I'm here to tell you, we're going to do it anyway. Okay? We're all doing it together. And if you're like, that sounds great, but I can't do it on my own, that's what the program is for. I will walk this through with you. And if you're wondering, like, why me? One, I am a neurodivergent, late diagnosed neurodivergent mom. Motherhood is what made me go, oh, hello, there's some things we need to think about. 2, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. That's why my day job is being a therapist. So in this space, I don't do therapy. This is not therapy. This is a psychoeducational program. We work on psychosocial, emotional skills and life skills. So this is not therapy. This is coaching and education. But you get support. You get group support from me. You get all the tools from the toolkit. You'll get that. You'll get access to those. And it's just a way to have someone work it through with you so that you're not working it through alone. And imagine 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now, which is about a 90-day program. But in the first 30 days, you're going to start seeing drastic changes. You're going to start really letting go of unnecessary guilt. You're going to be not burned out anymore. You're going to be not hustling anymore. You're going to make confident decisions. It's going to be empowered, intuitive motherhood that you are walking into. And within 30 days, you're going to start seeing that transformation. So imagine what that could be like for you. Imagine what that could be like for you as a mom, as a business owner, as just a person trying to thrive in this crazy world that we're living in right now. So that is also linked below. But if you're like, nah, I can handle it on my own, but this toolkit is like what I need, like I can work through it and get it done. The toolkit is there. It has everything you need to get rid of burnout, get rid of the mom guilt, and boost your confidence. That is the whole purpose of that toolkit. That is it. We're not doing the whole like building your life in a way that is, it's literally focused on burnout, mom guilt, and confidence. And the program is for the one-on-one help to really get you there faster, more focused, and to get you living this life in business and in life where you have a work-life balance that is chef's kiss. So, and the rest of this comes along the way. So all those will be below. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, leave a comment. If you're listening to this, because I am going to turn this into podcast form. So if you're listening to this in the podcast, reach out. You can find me on Instagram at soul_cadence_coaching. You can find me on Threads at soul_cadence_coaching and here on YouTube. That's pretty much it. My TikTok is basically dead at this point, so don't look for me there. You can find me on Facebook. You'll find everything that's on Instagram pretty much on Facebook, but I don't interact on Facebook. So it's just kind of there. So find me on Instagram and Threads and YouTube. And so I will see you guys around. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye, everybody.